Okay, so yeah, we're live. Yeah, okay, cool. I can't actually see like who all is watching this or anything, but I've got the chat up, so I'll hear y'all in the chat. And yeah, mainly I just wanted to. Oh yeah, the mic in just the left ear. Yeah, that's what I thought I was hearing too. I don't really know. Apologies. I thought that this. Testing, testing. Okay, yeah, it is just in the. Oh, it's mono. Okay, all right, there we go. All right. Now we're cooking with gas. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I mainly just wanted to do this stream to talk about a game that I've been playing. I think I got this. Let me go ahead and load up my save game here. Yeah, so Satisfactory. It is a game that I got it around like over 4th of July weekend, I guess. And before long, it had really kind of just, yeah, I got pretty into it. And I hadn't really played many games quite like it before. You know, there's Factorio, which is like a 2D factory builder type thing in an open world. And then there's Infinifactory, which is like a much more like, you know, it's a Zachtronics, like much more explicitly puzzly kind of thing. And but yeah, like, you know, this game, yeah, it was sort of recommended as like it's an open world first person factory game. And I had been having fun with some other stuff, you know, that was sort of similar around that time. Okay, all right, well, let me go back to, I'm just gonna, so part of what I want to stream here is like I built a whole bunch of stuff playing over the last 2.5 months or so. And I just kind of wanted to like document it partly, you know, and I figured I would just live stream that rather than just recording a video and putting it on my YouTube channel or something. Because I just kind of wanted to document everything I had been up to in this game. Because yeah, I mean, I've been playing it a whole lot, and I just reached like kind of the final milestone of the game that the game has so far. I should mention that this game is early access. It's I don't think it has a 1.0 date set, but and on Tuesday I think it's going to get its next big update, update 6. And I'm running the experimental branch right now, as you can see clearly in the top left corner. And it's basically like they put new features in there first. It's different from the No Man's Sky type model that I'm used to, where they just sort of suddenly unveil a new update and everybody is surprised and downloads it and plays it. Whereas here they actually push incrementally big new features and stuff into the experimental branch once it's up to a certain point of completion, and they get people testing it. And then after it spends a while in the experimental branch, it you know, it graduates into the early access branch, and eventually it'll hit 1.0. This game doesn't have its story mode implemented, or sorry, not story mode. It doesn't have its this is the game mode, but it doesn't have its story implemented actually. Like they've sort of held off on, you know, most overt narrative type things until 1.0 because they want it to be a surprise. Kind of like the Subnautica devs held off on adding the game's ending until that thing was, you know, until it was ready for final release. Anyway, I went back to here just because I'm pretty sure this is where my pod landed. So this is an open world, and oh, I should mention, I am going to spoil. There's no real story to spoil necessarily, but I am going to spoil all of the stuff in this world in this stream, as well as like all of the mechanics basically. So if you want to be unspoiled, then I think just stop watching now or and come back later or something. Anyway, this is an open world, and this was partly what drew me to it, because like I like puzzle games and all that, but like the idea of this big, and when you start off, you're just you can choose from one of 4 starting locations, and I chose the one that's recommended for beginners, the grasslands. And as you can see, yeah, your pod comes down. You've been sent here by the Fix-It Corporation, which is kind of this Amazon-like futuristic megacorp that controls everything and whatever. It's definitely it's a tongue-in-cheek kind of dystopia, but it's definitely recognizable as related to our own. And then, yeah, you come down in this pod, and then you deconstruct the pod, and that's actually what gives you the ingredients to build the hub that takes you through the tutorial thing. And so one of the first things that they tell you to do is search for resources. And it starts off with, you start off with way fewer resources. I think you can just scan for iron and copper. Yeah, you scan for iron, and it does the cool sweep out through the world. And yeah, by far the nearest one is one that so yeah, these are like deposits of resources in the world. Oh wait, I think I just ran right past. And obviously this is all built up now, so you're kind of seeing the present tense, but I'm going to be kind of walking through like the different stages of development, because this was my the place where I built my very first factory. I left a little bit going here and cleaned it up, but like otherwise I kind of turned this into like sort of a historic monument kind of thing. When you get near the end game, there are like these statues that you can get with the points that you earn from producing stuff. So I've just kind of turned this into a little park. That right there is our buddy, the Sky Ray, or I forget if it has a fictional name. But yeah, it's just this awesome, massive creature up in the sky that is just flying around the grasslands here. That is the space elevator there, which you are delivering all of the major stuff for each phase to. And yeah, one of your first tasks after you complete the tutorial is to just build the space elevator. So this starting area here, it's pretty gentle. There's a lot of resources, but a lot of them are kind of like, like this deposit here, it's rated as being impure. And what that means is that you don't get nearly as much, when you build a miner structure on it, you don't get nearly as much ore per minute out of it. And this whole concept of things per minute is like totally central to the game. And yeah, like I've got like even sort of a fancy mid-tier kind of thing on it, but it's only getting 60 per minute. That maybe sounds like a lot, but it's actually not that much. So actually what I'm going to do here, I'm going to start using something here. I'm going to start using my hover pack. And this is something that you actually only get like in the final third of the game, really. But it's a total game changer, and I am completely spoiled on navigating with it. So you're going to see me kind of just floating off the ground for probably most of the rest of this stream. Yeah, just because the hover pack is just so darn useful. And the reason for that is like, so when you start making your first little base things, you put down one of these things, the smelter, and that ore that we're producing, ignore this thing for now. This is just a splitter that divides the output. You get those pretty early on as well. So yeah, we've got ore coming up out of these miners here, and then it's flowing along these conveyor belts into these smelters, and it's turning that ore into ingots. The ingots are then passed to a different type of machine called a constructor. And this particular constructor is constructing screws, just plain old screws out of this thing, and it's producing them at the rate of 65 per minute. And yeah, like this, yeah. So that's kind of, and then like, yeah, here we've got two things happening in parallel so that we're actually producing 65 times 2, 130 per minute. And they're both getting merged along these belts here and then handed off to the main factory. So pretty much everything that we see in this area is pretty garbage. Like I didn't the very first version of everything that I built, you just kind of see it lets you build just on the grass here. So I can take, I can just build something with any old rotation here. And I can be like, yeah, sure, do this, and then, yeah, do this thing right here. But you actually really don't want to, from very early on, you really don't want to do this, because it makes it very hard to keep stuff in alignment and just adds to the labor of just, you know, moving stuff around and whatever. What you actually want to do is you unlock these things called foundations, which are just modular blocks that you can put down. And when you go to build a new structure, things actually snap to it. So when I rotate this thing, it's like rotating along nice 90-degree increments. And yeah, you can kind of just see that it's behaving as if it's on a grid now. And the constructors here take up exactly one foundation. So it makes it much easier. But they don't necessarily like force you to do any of that. So the very first factory that I built, using these two humble little impure iron deposits here, it was actually over this plateau area kind of thing, was just a total mess, built directly on the grass. And, you know, with conveyor belts going everywhere, like, you know, you'll kind of realize like, oh, actually I want to feed this thing's output into this other thing. And so you kind of like have to, you know, if one thing is over there and one thing's over here, you end up just kind of making like, you know, you can draw the most arbitrary, horrible, you know, mess sort of stuff here. You know, and Satisfactory players affectionately call this stuff spaghetti. You know, you can just make, and you know, and it gets particularly gnarly when you start like having things crisscross over one another and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, everybody makes spaghetti for their first factory, and that's okay. Because yeah, I tore this thing down, and this was right around the time I was able to build the space elevator, and I built. Also, I still didn't really know how to play. I mean, that was only like, you know, an hour or two into the game. I built something actually on this big grassland here. This roof, this big old platform that we're underneath right now, hadn't built that yet. I just built, you know, I was like, okay, well, I need more space, so I'm going to move into this big open grassland here. And I built more stuff. I built more, you know, I brought in iron from up here, and there's a copper deposit over there, and all that. And I built an even bigger mess on this grassland. And it was only after I had kind of gotten to the point where, yeah, like I had built a space elevator and inefficiently constructed some garbage and then fed that stuff into it, that I started to realize like, okay, yeah, maybe like this foundation thing, this seems like the way to go. And so I started building what eventually became this thing. This is still garbage though, I should say. Like, and when I say garbage, I mean there's the aesthetics of it, like just how it looks. This actually isn't that bad, you know, like you can kind of like tell what this is doing. But when another respect in which something in Satisfactory can be garbage is if it's inefficient, you know. Like, yeah, here, see, so this is a slightly more complex machine called an assembler. And what it does is it takes two types of things, and then, you know, you can pick from all these different recipes. I mean, this is the end of the game, so like I've got like all of the recipes, so that's totally overwhelming, whereas you start off with just a few. And what this is showing you is like, yeah, and actually it looks like this is reasonably efficient going on here. So yeah, this is like the critical thing that I don't think I really got on a deep level until later than I should have. But yeah, like when it says, so a recipe takes like, you know, this machine is taking 6 iron plate and 12 screw and producing 1 reinforced iron plate with it. But what the numbers that really matter are these 30 per minute and 60 per minute and 5 per minute things. Because what that means is that, okay, I need 30 iron plate per minute coming in here. And so that means that I need to like work backwards from that. You know, it's like, okay, where are the iron plates coming from? They're coming from here. And okay, we have like 30 ore getting turned into 30 iron ingots and delivered to this machine. But then this machine produces, out of 30 iron ingots, it produces 20 iron plates. So there start to become these like mismatches, you know, these very deliberately designed mismatches. And these actually become like the ratios that the player is thinking about for a lot of the core gameplay. So yeah, like I've got 20 iron plate per minute times 3 here, and that's all getting fed into the same thing. And then this is coming and it's getting split up. This thing is splitting this 60 iron plate equally into 2 streams of 30 iron plate each, and that actually balances out. Which is why every time this machine completes an iteration, you can see the new iron plates coming in from the input feed. It's going to finish. Boom. Okay, that's another reinforced plate, and now it starts filling up with more. It continues filling up with more iron plate, and so long as this number is 12, i.e., twice 6, when it completes, that means that it's going to continue producing without missing a beat or sitting idle for any length of time. So that is like a very important core principle of Satisfactory, because ultimately everything that you do is like chaining the inputs and outputs of these machines together into bigger and bigger combinations. Like, yeah, we've got here, this is a manufacturer. It can take like 3 or 4 ingredients and turn them into even more complex products. This is an old beast, yeah. And this is where this is partly what I mean by garbage. See, like, yeah, look, this machine just finished producing 1 heavy modular frame, but now it's sitting idle because it doesn't have enough modular frames being produced. It's full up on pipes, encased industrial beams, and screws. Those are coming in at a decent enough rate. But because I'm not producing 10 modular frame per minute and feeding it into this thing, it's sitting idle for a little bit. And you know, like, if you just care about getting a pile of heavy modular frames that you can build a few things with, that's fine. You know, like, something being inefficient really isn't the end of the world. But when you when you're trying to like produce stuff at scale, it becomes super important. This becomes a problem where you're like, oh man, I need to figure out how I'm going to produce a steady 10 or more modular frame per minute. You know, and you kind of got to work backwards from it. You're like, okay, well, where are these things coming from? Okay, it's doing these. Well, yeah, that explains it right there. This is only producing 3 per minute. What do I need to do 3 per minute? Well, I need some more reinforced iron plate. Oh yeah, I just know, like, I don't know what that looked like on the stream just now. Let me know in the chat. But this game auto-saves, which is fine. That's good. But when it auto-saves, the game completely freezes. And it's partly because my save game is massive. I've got like the entire world built up with random stuff. And I think just the CPU hit of serializing all of those objects at once, the actual write to disk is only like the save game is only like 50 megs, or, you know, it's a manageable amount for an SSD. Whereas, yeah, anyway, so I really hope that I don't just like freeze every time it autosaves, but I'll try to keep that in mind. But yeah. Yeah, so yeah, we've got multiple things producing modular frames here, but 2 times, and then yeah, I guess I've got this one. Yeah, so this is a concept that you find. There are these slugs that you find in the world, and we'll see some that you can use to overclock machines, and that actually lets you produce more than the stated number of things per minute at the cost of, since there's no free lunch, the inputs scale up commensurately, and also the power consumption goes way up. So, yeah, cool. Yeah, so, you know, you can overclock a machine to speed up output production, but you need to ramp up your corresponding input production. So, yeah, and then also you can underclock stuff. You know, if you don't need, you know, if you're only able to make a certain input rate, you know, and you want your machine to, like, you know, not be sitting idle and just start another one as soon as it finishes the previous one, you can underclock stuff. And so this gives you the ability to, like, kind of control the rates at which all of your resources and produced items are moving around. Anyway, so that's a lot of Satisfactory, not all of it, but that's a lot of it in a nutshell. And when I say that this factory here is garbage, it's because I just didn't understand, like, the numbers for this yet. Like, yeah, this manufacturer over here is producing computers. But yeah, like, I can already tell that like 8 more circuit boards, 7 more circuit boards are not going to come in by the time that this production completes. So it's going to be sitting idle. And, you know, I just didn't understand how to, like, create a nicely optimized factory setup. And so this factory is still producing something useful. And in fact, I am sending it, like these heavy modular frames here are coming out of this, and they're going down this conveyor. My organizational skills were also poor here, so like this definitely is, you know, getting pretty spaghetti-like. And then it's going into this thing, which is a train depot. And this train here, let me just hop on this train, at least for a little bit. So yeah, like once you start reaching like the early to mid game, like really like the early mid game, you start being able to do things that let you like move stuff around the world at bigger scales. As you can see here, I've got like a train with some freight cars and stuff. I'm actually going to bail out of this train because this is probably a good excuse to talk about exploration some. So that thing is, you know, it loaded in some of the modular frames and some other stuff I'm producing in the grasslands, and it's carrying it to a different part of the world. Very early on, like, yeah, I'm going to show. So yeah, these are all, I can see these resource deposits here because I built one of these, because I built that tower right there, not the space elevator, but the big tower. When you build that, it will show you, yeah, see all those overlapping circles are basically radar towers that scan the area inside of their circle, and they tell you where all of the resource deposits in the area are. And that's super useful because it lets you sort of like start making higher level strategic decisions about where you're expanding to. You're like, okay, well, I got to produce more of this thing. Like there will be like a tier goal where it's like, yeah, give me like 300 steel beams or something. And so you're like, okay, well, steel requires it requires coal and it requires iron. So where am I going to get coal? And so yeah, and so the game, you know, initially you're just kind of working in your little starting area. You have a crappy little factory just doing stuff, but then the game gets you hungry to like see what's out there in the larger world, you know, and you say like, okay, well, where's coal? You know, initially you just have the scanner. That's like the main way that you find out about stuff. And so you're like, okay, yeah, okay, coal is this way. So I'm going to explore in that direction. I have no idea what I'm going to find. This world is full of hostile creatures. Hostile creatures, like once you've like defeated hostile creatures in an area where you've built up and there are powered base structures, they stop spawning. So yeah, like if I kill, I guess I haven't killed this guy yet, but and yeah, sorry creature. There's only one type of creature in this game that I proactively destroy, whereas this guy was just kind of in the way. Anyway, okay, so yeah, you start venturing out into the world, and you run into hostile creatures, and at first you only really like have like a little sort of taser prod with, you know, to defend yourself with, and it's kind of rough. But eventually you get like a rebar gun, which is like a pretty decent like ranged weapon kind of thing. And then eventually you're able to like upgrade your sort of zapper stick into this thing, which is like a frickin' brutal sword type implement. And then you get this rifle, which, you know, there's a lot of different things you can do with it, but it basically like, yeah, like it can actually efficiently deal death and help you defend yourself. But yeah, so, you know, you venture out of the starting area and you start seeing the biomes change and stuff. You're like, whoa, these like terrain features are impressive. There's this massive waterfall, and I see some pink trees and like pods up there. I see this thing over here. And also look at this. There's like this endless abyss kind of thing here. Yeah, like that's just a pit down into nothing. And if you fall down there, normally if you die, you leave like a chest with all of your inventory in it. Whereas if you fall down there, as far as I know, you don't get your stuff back. That stuff is lost forever. I mean, this game is all about producing things, so you can always just produce more of that stuff, but it can be a real setback. So, so yeah, okay. So yeah, after I had kind of done the basics, I sort of worked up to like coal power and steel production. I was still in this kind of starting grasslands area. I found some coal, made some coal factories, pumped some water, but then it unlocked oil production. And I was like, okay, where's some oil? Oil is a new thing. I don't know how it works or whatever. but I'm going to scan for it. And my compass is kind of covered up by the chat window here, but yeah, that scan is going out for quite a while. It should be getting some pings, though. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, like 1,800 meters away, there was some oil, and so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna go. I guess I'm gonna go trek around. You know, I'm retracing my steps here, and obviously this train track was not here yet. I was just hoofing it through this wilderness that I had never explored before. And I'm like, oh yeah, what's this thing? Oh, it's a cave entrance that's going to be displaying some pop-in pretty soon here. Yep, boop, there it is. It's, you know, it's early access. There's some stuff that they're still doing some game development on it. So yeah, and so I went into this cave, and this cave is a very long cave, and it's full of spiders. I mentioned that there's only one type of creature in this world that I proactively destroy, and that is spiders. I hate them. They are like, you know, the black head crabs from Half-Life 2? They're like that, but bigger and more gross and worse. I am not arachnophobic, but like these things like get to me. They're just nasty and evil, and they're like super aggressive. They make all kinds of gross. Yeah. Anyway, I hate them. That cave is full of spiders, but I stuck it out. So let's see here. How do I want to get up? I'm actually going to cut ahead to where, or I'm not going to cut. I have no ability to cut. There's no teleporting in this game, but I am going to use my hover pack here to kind of just fly my way up this sheer cliff. That is a funky little like water pool that I haven't figured out what it is. Maybe it'll be something in the story for the game. I don't know. And then you also get the ability to, yeah, like relatively around the time that you get trains, you get this this zipline tool. And the zip line, so these are power lines. You know, you create a power source like a biofuel burner or a coal power plant, and you connect them to your machines with power poles and then cables. And this thing lets you just ride any of your cables like a zip line. And initially I was just like, oh, cool, that seems like a nice way to like get around your factory. But then I realized that actually you can use it to traverse the world, like way before you have, here's the train. Way before you have hover packs, you're able to, like, you know, if you're smart and if you're, you know, kind of tenacious, I should say, with it, you can ascend ridiculous heights just by placing poles and zip lining up them. And so that's what I did. You know, I started like once I realized that, like, you know, there was a whole other, you know, that there was a whole world out here, and you can start to see glimpses of different biomes. There's that forest with the purple trees over there. There's some funky mushroom looking things off to the east. Yeah, and so this is a and so yeah, this train line that I'm on right here, I actually built only very recently because I realized that the train going through that long twisty tunnel full of spiders was totally unnecessary now that I had a hover pack, and I could build this train line that just went up and up and up and onto you know, like basically went over and around the tunnel, because it was actually a much shorter route. It shaved, like, you know, a good like 45 seconds off of that train line's route, and it I didn't have to, like, you know, worry about the spiders anymore. The spiders don't cause any problems to the train, but you know, I just didn't want to have to go back into those caves. And so now, you know, like, yeah, when I was just, you know, relatively recently, like a week ago, creating this new train line, I left the old train lines in the ground, and it has this very, like, we don't go to Ravenholm anymore kind of feeling, where it's like, oh yeah, like if you follow those train tracks into those caves, you're gonna run into, like, don't go there. You know, it's like it has this abandoned mine shaft kind of feeling, which I really like. And that actually gets to something, you know, like, I mean, we've only seen like some of the stuff that I've built so far, but because players are like building and expanding, like a core mechanic of the game is building and expanding, specifically like figuring out new places that you want to build stuff, what strategic possibilities it affords you to move into a certain area, all that kind of stuff. You're creating stuff, yeah, and that's the other end of the train line of the train line that I cut off. So yeah, that's the far end of the cave. And yeah, and there goes the train. So this whole idea of like players creating something that eventually, you know, after like my 200 something hour playthrough here, becomes a sort of archaeology where that's the old stuff from, you know, my first 10 hours with the game, is pretty fascinating. You know, like I like the idea of players building stuff and then like going so far beyond that in this gigantic world that stuff starts to feel older and newer, and you start to get a sense, the same kind of sense that you get in like a real life city or something, where you're like, oh yeah, that's the old neighborhood, this is the new neighborhood, oh look, they rebuilt all of this, you know, they built all this new stuff, they knocked down this old stuff, etc. So yeah, when I emerged from that cave, I definitely wasn't in the grasslands anymore. I was in this kind of much more jungly feeling thing. There were still these pink trees overhead, still way high up. And so yeah, I was exploring this jungle, and I was like, man, that oil deposit, I was still chasing the blip of that crude oil deposit. I was like, man, I gotta find crude oil, because that's like the key to producing the next categories of things. And so it's like, okay, I'm only 600 meters away from it now. And this train route that I took was kind of, you know, this train route that I ended up building was really just like, I was just sort of building over what was previously, you're able to build this, something that made that whole effort definitely way easier and more fun, was that you gain the ability to you build this, you're able to build vehicles, and this thing is like just a good dune buggy that can handle rough terrain. You got to power it with biofuel, but yeah, so I wasn't doing all of this exploration on foot, but you know, there were definitely some parts of it, like when I reached this bit here where it's just like, okay, there's like this cascading waterfall. I'm auto-saving here. Whoop. Yeah, there's like this cascading waterfall, and then just like a big lake. How am I going to cross that? I mean, my answer at the time was, I'm going to zip line. I'm going to build power poles and then zip line across it. But then, yeah, I came into this area, which I think is like unofficially referred to as the Forest Lake area. And that's what I called it on the little stop here. Initially, it was just the only Forest Lake thing until I added multiple train lines. And so initially, like all of the stuff that you're about to see that's like built by me, these are natural features, or I don't know, left by some previous ancient civilization, I don't even know. But all of the factory stuff that you see here, obviously all of that, none of that was around. All that was really here were a bunch of creatures that I had to fight, including some spiders. And then these, where is one? Yeah, here we go. These oil deposits, crude oil, pure. And then yeah, and it's like, okay, well, I brought enough resources to build an extractor, and so now I'm extracting crude oil from the ground. And unlike just non-liquid stuff that just moves along these conveyors here, this is actually moving along a pipeline. And so you got to build pipes. You can build elbow junctions for those pipes, but you know, things move a little differently. You know, they don't have like, I mean, there is a flow direction, but it's not quite like the conveyor belts, mergers, and splitters paradigm. It's just kind of all moving around through the same system. And yeah, you can build pumps if the fluid needs to go uphill any. And so then, yeah, I started building. Initially, they were all just built out here until I realized, like, oh yeah, I should start building on foundations. I should build these platforms out over the water. We've got a nice... It's almost covered up, or a decent chunk of it is covered up, but this is a massive lake. And if you look at it on the map here, yeah, this is like one of the bigger lakes in the game. And it's kind of right in the middle of the map. I didn't know it at the time because, you know, I was just, the fog of war was only getting revealed bit by bit. But yeah, I was kind of at the center of the map, and here was some oil, and I was able to start producing things like plastics. So yeah, it takes in crude oil, and then it produces plastic 20 per minute, but it also produces a byproduct. This is a concept that they introduce in the mid-game as the concept of byproducts. It's like heavy oil residue. Well, it's just a process. It's just a product of you turn crude oil into plastic. You're going to get some of this residue as well. Well, what can you do with this residue? Well, you can take it to. Good Lord, am I really? Yeah. So this is also garbage. I want to be clear. This is still spaghetti. I still did not really know what I was doing when I built all of this mess, but it was in the middle of the map, and it did kind of become like my main sort of just base of operations kind of thing. Anyway, so yeah, I was piping this. Oh my gosh, why am I piping this stuff all the way over here? Anyway, yeah, not how I built later things. Oh, I see. No, wait, this is. Are we building? Yeah, so you can have machines here that are building. Okay, yeah. So this refinery here, the refinery, just like every other machine, has a bunch of different recipes. You can produce plastic with the residue byproduct. You can produce residual plastic, which is part of a different process, out of this resin stuff, along with water, which you have to pump up from the lake. And then, but you can also make residual fuel out of, you can take this residue and turn it into fuel, and the fuel can be fed into a new and pretty powerful type of power source, fuel generators. And they take liquid fuel as an input, and then they produce power. I haven't talked that much about power, but yeah, I basically have everything in the world wired into one grid. And that sounds like absolute madness, and it kind of is. There's no reason that you can't have just different facilities with totally separate power things. But ultimately, because of the way that power generations work, sometimes you're producing in excess, and so you've just got some power that's just going unused. And you want to be able to spread that, and especially when you're expanding, you want to be able to you don't want to have to just build the most basic kinds of generators to power the new machines that you're setting up. That is actually, I think I left them around here. When I first expanded to here, yeah, these are the relics of my initial expansion to the forest lake. These are biofuel burners, and they're barely doing anything right now because my worldwide power needs are met otherwise. But yeah, these are just the basic things, and then I realized and I had a couple of refineries running on this, and I was producing a little bit of plastic, but I had to keep the biofuel things charged. This isn't solid biofuel isn't something that you can automate. It's one of the few things that you can't automate. So I was like, okay, well, I've got coal generators. Let me see if I can get a coal plant going. Well, where's the nearest coal? Well, my little radar ping here pointed straight up. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, I guess I have to figure out a way to get up this cliff. And thanks to the zip line, I was able to get up on top of this cliff here and get into what I think players and possibly the devs call the Red Forest. And I was like, oh man, this is pretty. This seems really, is this a chill place? Dear readers, it is absolutely not a chill place. It is just, there's so many hostile creatures here. There's those spiders, there's high-level large spitters. It's just, it's bad. And in fact, the actual number of resource deposits here, so this is a shaded topography map here. So you can kind of tell this lighter region in the middle of the map here. This is the big plateau with the pink trees on it, and that is the Red Forest. And if you look at the actual resources here, they're kind of few and far between relative compared to just down on the ground where there's especially in the grasslands where it's just absolutely lousy with iron and copper and limestone deposits. So this was something, this is kind of where the open world starts to become a really valuable design, I started to realize that like, initially I just kind of thought that like the fact that they had built this gigantic open world was just sort of like, it was almost like a luxurious thing to have just for, because my model for this was like Infinifactory or something, where it's like, yeah, this is mostly just about constructing factories and positioning things so that the factories are efficient and they deliver what you want and all that kind of stuff. But I started to realize like, yeah, like each of these biomes has like very different, threats and opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And that's actually, and I really started, in addition to obviously being beautiful, I really started to appreciate the sort of like world design of this as like, okay, this area is, it's sparse, but it's got some rare sort of critical mid to late game resources in it. And so you end up having to venture into these like more dangerous areas to get the valuable stuff, and not just like kind of get in and get out, but you actually do have to like build a miner here. And this was just like a little taste of that. So it's like, okay, here's the coal deposit. I've got my coal miner here, and I am going to use these vertical conveyors to run this stuff all the way down. And at the time I was just like, this is so ridiculous. This is a ridiculous thing. Do other players do ridiculous stuff like this? I don't even know. Obviously people do, and this isn't even that ridiculous at the end of the day. It's pretty straightforward. But this was sort of another one of those like expansion moments where you're like, oh yeah, wow, like belting in coal from up on top of this cliff down to here where the water is. Because that's the thing about water versus conveyors, is that you can move stuff on a conveyor up or down or anywhere. Whereas anytime you want to pump water, if you want to pump it upward, you have to use a pump, and each pump only generates a certain amount of head lift. So there's this mechanic where, if you're doing something involving a liquid, whether it's that oil or this water or something else, then you kind of want to like, you don't want to have to like pipe it over long distances. Or if you do, you use like a fluid train car. So yeah, that was like a good, that was sort of eye-opening. And yeah, initially this was just an outpost. I had like a few refiners running, producing plastic. When I was taking the plastic back, I was getting in my little buggy and driving back. And then I was like, you know what? I just got access to these trains. And I think the ability to, like, because when I realized what trains could do, you have, hey buddy. When I realized that trains could automate sending resources very long distances across, arbitrarily long distances across the world, I was like, okay, that I need to do this, because this is how I get plastic back at what I thought of as my home base back in the grasslands at the time. And so I built that train line. I ran it through the tunnels, and it was difficult, but I felt a major sense of accomplishment when I did it. But then eventually I started producing more and more stuff here, like more and more, and I was like, okay, well, is there any iron and copper near here, and can I expand to that? Well, yes, there was. It was a little bit of a way through what this forest is actually on. I'm going to get into a tube here. These are just little transport tubes that help you cross long distances easily. Hey, Cheese, it's good to see you. Cheese mentioned in the chat, these creatures aren't too happy that I'm invading and industrializing their home. That's something that, yeah, I should have mentioned earlier. This game is unquestionably about, capitalist extraction and industrial exploitation of this beautiful alien world. I don't want to downplay how foregrounded that is. It makes you very, very aware that you are doing something, and I was kind of determined from early on not to be like the terrible, because the trailer for this game, when I was considering buying this game, the trailer shows a brief thing where the player character is revving up a chainsaw and cutting down a bunch of trees and reducing it to this barren plain, and I was like, ooh, do I want to play this game? I'm gonna feel like crap if I if I play a game that's just about like raising these beautiful old growth forests or whatever. And what I found relatively quickly was that you don't have to do that. It makes things, it definitely changes your play style, and like where you can build. And this forest here, as you can see, this forest goes on for quite a ways. So this forest is not the kind of place that you're really going to be building stuff, at least down near ground level. You can build stuff above the trees, but yeah. So, you know, I sort of like resolved as soon as I started playing this game, really, to sort of like, you know, even though I was just like, you know, screwing it all up and producing these ugly, horrible, you know, extractive buildings and stuff, I wasn't going to cut down trees. You know, like I'll gather leaves and stuff to feed, you know, to create biofuel, you know, to like power like the lowest level of tech. But then once I graduate out of that, I don't have to do that anymore, and then I can leave the trees alone. I can just have conveyors running through trees. And so that whole thing of like working with the landscape is actually like a really interesting, you know, like, yeah, like I found it, I found it made the game a lot more interesting having to work around nature. And I mean, obviously there's a bunch of stuff that you can't just do away with, like a tree. There's like these rock formations, there's these bodies of water and stuff. And yeah, so the world, like the real value of this open world is that it's just creating a bunch of stuff that you have to contend with, you know, and it makes what would otherwise be relatively straightforward construction projects and something that feels a lot more puzzly, you know, into like this much more like organic kind of thing where you're like solving all these little problems about like, yeah, where should I run this tube so that it can just sort of like duck and weave through the forest here. So yeah, like, you know, I feel like it's definitely kind of like a RoboCop-esque social satire of like, yes, this is a horrible capitalist entity that is doing something, and you, the player, are complicit in that. To the game's credit, they are not like just, you know, rubbing your nose in it, you know, the way that BioShock like just kind of rubbed your nose in the fact that you had been doing what the game had asked you to, and turning into like this big M. Night Shyamalan bullshit, you know, kind of story thing. You know, so yeah, and I'm very curious as to where they go with it in the story, you know. You know, like, yeah, like when the full narrative for this game comes in, like how are they going to talk about the sort of, you know, the grim industrial capitalist exploitation type stuff that you're doing here. So anyway, yeah, I expanded, and then I was able to start producing, we got an autosave freeze here. Oh, Sanctum was a previous game by the devs of this game, right? Yeah. So yeah, this is still garbage. I still didn't really understand how to make machines run at like optimal efficiency or something. So there's just a bunch of stuff waiting on other stuff. So this is still garbage. But what I realized after spending like one evening connecting to a friend's multiplayer server and seeing how they had it set up, they had this concept called the mall that was just like, it just had depots of everything. So, you know, it had stocks. So it's like, okay, these factory machines are running, it's off doing stuff, and meanwhile, it's just filling these bins up with stuff that you need. Like, say, yeah, cable. I need cable. I like to keep lots of cable around because I'm always building those power poles. And yeah, and it's just always producing more and more. Yeah, you can see the vertical conveyor swinging into action to replenish the stocks in this thing. So yeah, and it started to make sense to like just have one big depot where a bunch of my, you know, raw materials were, so that as I was expanding in different directions, I could like just kind of go back here to refuel. And so this is why this ended up eventually becoming, you know, my sort of main base, because it's in the center of the map, and you know, and also it just has easier access to more resources, you know. So yeah, and so then, yeah, what did I do next? Yeah, and so then I got through like phase 2 and maybe phase 3 or something, and I started thinking like, okay, well, let me expand to some other parts of the world here. And so I worked my way up. Let's bring up the map here, and yeah, so I started working my way up the west coast of this world here, and I'm going to take a different route to that than the one that I took to expand, but I want to just kind of show off, you know, the biome shifts here. So yeah, and this is well before I built this other train line, this westward facing train line. Where is the train? Is the train on its way? It is. All right, so we have to wait a bit to get here, but and we get some more refineries and some fuel generators. Yeah, just sci-fi as hell skybox here with a galaxy, ringed planet, pretty star fields, etc. But yeah, this is a pretty good view of like the lake, of the forest lake. Yeah, the trains do run 100% reliable. Like the only thing that can like change a train's like travel time and route is if it runs into another train that you've incorrectly placed, that you made a bad decision about where trains should be on which lines. And so when they run into each other, they'll derail, and then you have to like interact with them to put them back on the thing. You'll notice here that like that most of this track is just a single track, and they do this loop around thing to be able to pass through the station. That's a choice on my part. Other people do train routes that are actually loops, so that you could have multiple trains going on the loop, you know, and then you don't have to worry, you know, like more trains come by more frequently. This is just kind of, I don't know. I think at some point probably I will want to make like a full loop type train line, but yeah. All right, so yeah, we're gonna head out. This train is gonna head out west, and it's going to leave the forest lake behind. We've got the Red Forest Plateau to the south of us here. We've got the Great Forest to the north. And yeah, that is actually the edge of a big waterfall, and we can kind of see a little bit of the area beyond. So yeah, now we're going to pass through an area called the Crater Lakes. It's sort of an open grassland, but it has these big old craters. Hello, good evening. Yeah, so yeah, Crater Lakes, nice open grasslands, big sources of water. And yeah, we are about to go over a waterfall into the area that I expanded into next. And yeah, it's nighttime, so it's gonna be a little different from, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, this is the Rocky Desert. It's a big old desert with these mesas and stuff. There's a big old mountain peak type thing over there. And obviously I hadn't built any of this yet. That is a particle accelerator producing nuclear pasta, just for points at this point. And yeah, this is also built onto a big lake, because the thing that I had just unlocked that I knew that I needed to produce some sort of facility was bauxite, which is a type of mineral that you can pipe into refiners and mix with water to produce alumina solution, which you can then in turn turn into aluminum scrap, which you can then in turn move into foundries and produce aluminum ingots, and then you can produce aluminum products. And that's a whole different category of more complex things. But yeah, you can kind of see like from the byproducts and stuff like that, yeah, like this has some water as a byproduct. This produces silica as a byproduct, which you could pump into a later part of the process. So in these later tiers, they really complicate, you know, it's no longer just one thing comes in, another thing goes out. You know, it's got this complex kind of thing going on. What's going on here? Is the output for this clogged or something? Or are we just not producing here? What's going on? Yeah, so you're just always debugging stuff like this. All right. Wow, I don't even know what happened there. All right, so I'm going to head out to the area where I expanded Yeah, because initially I was just doing these initial like explorations of like finding a new area of the game and expanding and all that kind of stuff in my in the Explorer buggy. So I was just driving around, passing through tunnels, going through like narrow mountain passes and across plains and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember the first time that I emerged into the Rocky Desert here, and it was cool. And so yeah, that bauxite stuff, I knew that I wanted to build a base here. There's some very readily available. This is another like beginner level starting location. You've got some limestone right there. You've got some iron here and some copper right over there. So I set up like just sort of a little base to like create the basics, the stuff that you use the most of when you're just building out the most basic kind of infra. Like iron plates and wiring and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, later, so yeah, I knew that I needed to like start doing some stuff with bauxite here to produce aluminum goods. And so yeah, like I found all of the bauxite, almost all of the bauxite in the game is up high on top of the big plateau. So you have to venture into like this, this threatened space. So I ended up building this absolutely ridiculous, this is like, half a kilometer up probably. And so I built this big weird thing of like conveyors that pipe, and yeah, I guess we can, yeah, I built this pipe up here so I could like, so it didn't take me like, 15 minutes to get up and down from it. Good question. Are mineral deposits infinite? Yes, they are infinite. And obviously that's not realistic in the sort of ecological sense of like, yeah, like resources are finite and eventually you're going to tap it out. Oh my goodness. All right. Yeah. So when I switched to the experimental build overhauls creatures. And so it caused all of the creatures in the game to respawn, even in areas that you had already built stuff up in. And so, yeah, I have not been back to this bauxite miner here. And good lord, that's a large family of spitters. Yeah, you can see the rest of the red forest plateau there. All right, let's get out of here. But yeah, resource deposits are infinite. It's not realistic, but I think it was basically a design choice that made basically everything else in the game work. I think, yeah, let's go back here. Yeah, because otherwise, if you can extract all of the iron out of a particular iron deposit, then the player becomes a locust. Areas become used up, like, at the point that a factory that you've built up in an area is just no longer capable of producing anything because its iron deposit has dried up, this entire thing becomes useless. So it would have been like this massive invalidator of the player's creations. So I think they definitely made the right call there, even though it's kind of, it's sort of counter-environmental. It's sort of like, oh, well, yeah, there'll always be more iron. So like, I think that was just a bit of ludonarrative dissonance per se that they had to just bite off. So anyway, I brought this bauxite down, I belted it all the way over to that lake, and I set up that big old mess of an aluminum facility. And I was starting to learn about how to do things a little better, but like I still just didn't really know what I was doing. And so at that point, I had kind of unlocked like most of the tiers in the game. And I started getting things that are like advanced late game type things, like nuclear power. And the power situation had been bugging me for a while, actually, because it was, when you're not producing enough power. Actually, yeah, I'm going to catch this train here. When you're not producing enough power, your operation shuts down. Like, it'll basically blow a fuse, and all of your machines will stop working, and you have to like go and I think any power node, including like a power pole, you can turn it back on. But if you're not actually producing enough power, then flipping the breaker isn't going to do anything. So you're always producing more capacity, more of those like coal generators and fuel generators that I've showed you. But then you use up that capacity by building more machines that consume power. So that's a whole loop to the game. And until like up around the point that the game unlocks the ability to build nuclear reactors for you, you've probably been feeling the power crunch in a lot of ways. Yeah, this is just a line that I built very recently through the Rocky Desert. That's a Conterium mining operation, and it's really just passing the ingots along. Yeah, exactly. You're always looking for additional deposits to increase your throughput. Yep, it's just all about tapping more and more, a wider and wider base of resources. That's kind of what expanding does. So yeah, and so I was like, geez, should I bite the bullet and try to do nuclear power? And I knew a few things about it at that point. The resource uranium is incredibly rare. There are only 4 deposits for it in the entire world. Yeah, see, and they're all in pretty hard to get to places. And it's a whole operation, like you've got like the sort of the machines that you need to build and stuff to produce uranium fuel rods that go into nuclear reactors, along with a crap ton of water to produce astronomical amounts of power. The whole operation behind that, you need like several machines all working in concert. You need a blender that's like turning the uranium into an encased fuel cell, I think, or yeah, it's just a whole bunch of stuff. And then once the nuclear reactor does its thing and generates that power, it produces uranium waste. And this is one of the most interesting. I'm heading to that place now, so yeah, the game offers you this kind of devil's bargain in a sense of like, okay, these reactors, the power output is like orders of magnitude higher than any other type of power generator that you can produce, but there's all of this complexity that you have to worry about, and you're doing something, you're producing waste that is quite unlike any of the other types of byproducts, and I'll show you why. I'll illustrate what I mean partly here. So yeah, this is a facility that I built for a late game thing. It's totally ridiculous. I'm bringing in stuff from 2 different train lines. It's all coming down into this. It's producing these very high value things. Yeah, I don't know if I am actually. Yeah, so there's this building that you might have seen in one of my bases. It's called the Awesome Sink. And basically, like, I think partly the joke is that it's a furnace, and that you can feed stuff into it, and it gets, and you gotta power it, obviously. And then the stuff that you feed into it actually just goes away. It just gets destroyed. And it turns into, like, coupons. It's weird, but yeah, it turns into coupons. And so it's actually a way of, if you're producing too much of something, it's a way of turning that into something useful. And then the things that you can use that coupon to buy are at this little shop type thing that you can build. And yeah, you can build just basic stuff. You can build signs to put in your stuff. You can build things that help you manage conveyors and tubes and pipes and all that sort of stuff. Oh yeah, that's right. I thought they took these out of the different types of foundations that let you do things that let you build really fancy bases and stuff. Yeah, just a whole bunch of stuff, and then later on some like vanity type stuff. This is the stuff that I built, that I was building in that little museum monument type thing in the starting area. Was just, yeah, like once I think I don't quite have enough tickets for the confusing creature statue, and then after that is the 1,000 ticket golden nut thing, which will probably take quite a while. So yes, yeah. So I bring up the awesome sink just to mention that yeah, like there are a few items that you cannot sink. Like they just won't go in. They will clog the input of the awesome sink. And nuclear waste, uranium waste, and plutonium waste are just such those things. And so it's like, okay, well, crap. What do I do? Well, one of the viable strategies, I did not consider it viable because I am playing a kind of don't be a horrible, planet destroyer sort of person, or just like try to have as minimal an impact as possible. I had taken that as like sort of a tenet of my playstyle. This area, unrelatedly, is called the Spire Coast. It just got an art update in the experimental branch, and so when Update 6 goes live on Tuesday, everybody's going to get to see, people who aren't on the experimental branch get to see this. It is gorgeous. It's got a bunch of like high-value oil deposits. It's very complex and interesting to explore. It's not like a super hateful monster place, but there's definitely a decent number of creatures and stuff. It's really cool looking. Hats off to the art team and level designers for building this stuff, because it just looks so cool. And then we're passing into the desert. So nuclear waste. You can either just store it, and I've seen videos and screenshots of people just like building these massive vaults that they're just piping more and more and more uranium waste into. I mean, eventually it's going to fill up, so I don't know what, you really can't, and the other thing that you can do with uranium waste, and I'm slowly making my way across the world. This is there's some oil deposits right there that I'm using to make plastic, and that's what's allowing me to generate these computers. Oh, it looks like my rubber operation got a little jammed up or something. Actually, let's just go here. These walkways here are definitely not my finest hour as far as like, this is going to be some messy garbage, but so I was sort of so it is possible, if you build even more complicated infra, to turn uranium waste into non-fissile uranium, which in turn can be processed in a particle accelerator into plutonium into plutonium fuel that you can then turn into a fuel cell that you can then either feed back into a reactor, which produces plutonium waste, which you cannot do anything with. You cannot sink it, and you cannot turn it into anything else. So that stuff you really do just have to store. Or you can sink the plutonium fuel cell. That's just like, that's almost kind of arbitrary, but that is what the designers decided. And it makes sense as a design choice because, all right, I'm gonna have to just like fly down the length of my train tracks here. So basically the designers are giving you a choice with nuclear power. Either you can like store the waste unsustainably in a way that's going to kind of like, produce this continual burden, or you can try to build a facility that doesn't generate any permanent waste. Yes, right, and that's true, right? Because like humans can't like in real life, it's another unrealistic design move that I think does have some integrity, which is that, like in real life, obviously humans do just have to deal with nuclear waste, and we just try to make it as safe as possible. We store it in as secure a way as possible and all that. I actually ended up reading about some of the political ramification, just basically like where various leftists and stuff came down on the issues of nuclear power and stuff. How long has it taken me to build all this? This has been, I got the game over 4th of July weekend, so this has been 2.5 months of pretty regular playing, not every day, but like, almost every day, and like on weekends a fair amount and stuff. So this is all, and this is by far the most ridiculous thing. Like basically at the point that I realized, okay, I want to build a waste-free nuclear facility that turns all of its waste into plutonium rods that I then sink and turn into tickets, and that I can just let run indefinitely. I don't have to worry about running out of waste storage or anything. That was the real appeal, because I wanted to be able to, it can awesome sink your free time. Yes, oh, absolutely, yeah. So anyway, so yeah, and so I started to like plan it out. I like, you know, some people use spreadsheets, but I used like I used Miro just because I'm used to using that for other stuff and for work and stuff. But I basically made a big board of like everything that the nuclear thing would need. And so what I'm doing here, one of the nuclear waste, one of the uranium, the naturally occurring uranium deposits is in a cave, and it looks like it's got some pop in there, but it's in a cave behind this waterfall. And you can see here this the classic glowing green stuff. I am belting the uranium out of that cave, and then I've got some sulfur nearby, and I'm using that to generate sulfuric acid. I'm piping the uranium and the sulfuric acid into these blenders to produce encased uranium cells with a sulfuric acid byproduct. And then I'm feeding those cells into these manufacturers and combining it with some other stuff which is also complicated to produce, and producing these fuel rods. And these fuel rods are only getting produced, you know, once in a while, but that's fine because the power plants take a while to just burn through a single fuel rod. And and for each rod that they burn, they produce 50 uranium waste. That is what's coming out here, and it's going down those belts. And so some people are just stuffing those into containers. And when they fill up, I guess the whole thing gets backed up and the reactor shuts down. I considered that unacceptable. But you can see that it's generating 2,500 megawatts per reactor here. And so I did the math, and it was this project really that made me, it was like the process of like kind of tabulating out like all of the stuff that needed to come into this and go out of it. That made me finally kind of get like how to keep things running efficiently and all that. It's not totally efficient, obviously, because, you know, the concrete, I'm producing too much concrete. The concrete is backed up, but it's fine because, you know, it's able to continue producing the output steadily. So, so see you around, Graham. Thanks for tuning in. And the reason that this sort of like forced me to like really learn how to play the game right was that I knew that this was like high consequence, like that I didn't want this facility to get all messed up. And one reason for that is actually because uranium is just dangerous to handle. Like, you know, you start getting irradiated if you, you start taking damage if you just even pick up a piece of uranium or something, and you don't have a rad suit. So, so there was an element of like danger in this sense that I could like maybe permanently screw something up here. And that was what it was, the fear of doing that and the desire to make like an actual waste-free, something that actually like balanced out kind of the stuff that I was producing here. That was what really made me, you know, and it was quite it was quite an undertaking. Like, it took me a while to build this, obviously. And it involves piping in resources. I'm bringing in some bauxite from down there, some coal and bauxite from down there. I'm bringing in some nitrogen gas that comes from like this sort of gas well fracking type thing that's being piped in, you know, from the south here and then fed into this thing, which is producing nitric acid. That's an important part of the non-fissile uranium generation process. That's the particle accelerator, obviously. And then I've got a whole little sort of small aluminum operation here producing the heat sinks that are needed to produce the final completed plutonium fuel cell that I am then sinking right there. So yeah, it's just a whole big thing. And by the time I had finished building this, I was like, wow, this is, I've reached another level of play. I kind of feel like I'm actually decent at this game now. I'm still, you know, messing up and stuff, but like I'm able to like, you know, to sort of comprehend. I can do the math, you know, and kind of tune things to run properly. And yeah, like I'm bringing in some quartz from over here and then like belting it all this way. And yeah, I chose to do it on this site partly because, you know, the uranium there is nice and, but also because the very first time, before any of this had been built, my very first time in the swamp here was just an absolutely horrible experience. I was like coming, I think, from the south here, and I was like, oh, look, a swamp. I guess I'll just start wandering into this. Dear readers, I experienced a horror movie. Oh god. Yep, that's why. So yeah, those spiders there, just absolutely awful creatures. And yeah, so I ventured into the middle of this swamp and got attacked by those spiders and a bunch of other stuff. And it was just a horrible, it was a bad enough experience that I just didn't want to. Man, that thing is really trying to attack me from. God, yeah, I can't stand its little sounds. Ugh. Anyway, yeah, and on the other hand, it is kind of adorable. So yeah, so when I came back here thinking this is potentially where I want to build my nuclear facility, I started building, I built a long walkway out of foundations. There's this mode for the building tool called Zoop mode where you can just build these long walkways. And so I initially just staked out these long walkways that just went across the entire thing because I didn't want to just trudge through the swamp here. I was that against, I was I want to be above this all, whatever. Yeah. And so then I was like, okay, yeah, I think this is where I want to build my nuclear facility. And so I just started building out these massive swaths. I knew I was going to need a lot of space. I ended up building too much open space, way more than I needed, but I would rather have had more space than I needed than to run out of space and be right up against a cliff face or something. So anyway, yeah, so I basically just built, and yeah, I'll try to duck down here and not get attacked by spiders. But yeah, you can see that just there's this entire swamp down here, and I've just got this underlayer, and yeah, I'm actually piping the water up. I've got all these water extractors here because the nuclear power plants need tons of water. So I've got basically one extractor per reactor just going at full tilt here. And it's pumping the water up a good, I don't know, what is this, 100, 200 meters? And yeah, and I have multiple pumps along here. And so yeah, it was a decision, but it's one I mostly haven't regretted. And I certainly don't regret, to me, this is the only way that you can build anything in this swamp. The idea of trying to build something else, trying to build down at ground level in this swamp is just totally unacceptable. It's just I would never do that. So yeah, so at the point that I had this nuclear facility up and working, my power overhead. So yeah, when you interact with the power pole, you can see your consumption as the orange line, then you can see your production and your capacity, and then it also shows a line for your max consumption. But initially, my power consumption was way down here, and I was oh wow, I have effectively infinite power. I could just build and build for days without having to worry about running out of power anymore. So mission accomplished there, great. So what am I going to do? Well, it had just unlocked the tier 4 goals for me, and they're not on screen anymore because I completed them earlier today, but they are massive. They're just these massive quotas of thousands of highly complex objects that take a very real effort to produce. And so I was okay, well, it seems like this is the final challenge of the game, and it kind of seems like I'm going to need to source resources from everywhere in order to complete this final phase of the game, phase 4, or it's the final phase for early access at least. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna do that. And so a lot of what I'm gonna do, kind of just a world tour now, and just sort of briefly show off all the different stuff that I built. Oh hey, cool. Let me hitch a ride on Swamp Train here. Whoop. That's how you hitch a train in Satisfactory, is you just wait for it to pass you by and then you quickly press E to interact. And yeah, I was still kind of bad at building train lines here, so it kind of wiggles back and forth before I had figured out how to do that. Right now we're passing through something called the Titan Forest. It's just got really big trees. It looks amazing. It's kind of a pain to get around in because it's so occluded. Yeah, that's I need to go back and just fix that. The track clipping through that nonsense right there is not something I really find acceptable anymore. But yeah, and so there's this. So we looked at the Rocky Desert off in the far northwest of the world. But let me take a train now to do a little transfer here to the eastern desert, the Dune Desert. And so yeah, this is that on the left here is that oil facility that is producing plastics and computers. Yep, we're doing all that stuff. And yeah, this desert has a pretty different feel to it. As you can see, it doesn't have like all of the kind of palm trees and foliage and stuff. It really is just like Sahara-esque, like rolling dunes. Before I had built anything here, it was actually like a really beautiful area. I really enjoyed just kind of tooling around this in the dune buggy. It's really a pretty area. And then I built a big just splat of industrial hellscape over it. But there is still like, I really only took up like a small percentage of it. It's definitely got like some, plateaus and mesas and stuff off to the east here. And there's actually these big oases. Yeah, there's like I'm bringing water in from over there. And then there's another oasis off to the north here. Yeah, I totally ruined it, yeah. Yeah, and you can see the map here. Like, it really is just a huge expanse. This facility, this wasn't the first of the Phase 4 mega factories that I built, but this is producing the, I think like the jet propulsion magnetic field generator. Yeah, this is producing magnetic field generators. And yeah, it's cranking them out. And yeah, all of this stuff, all of this, like those resources that are being belted in from the swamp, this other stuff that's being belted in from like over here and all this. I'm not actually using any trains to move any of the materials into this thing. And then yeah, like what? Yeah, off in that direction, I'm bringing in coal and copper, I think. So yeah, just massive, and it's all just kind of going into these machines here, producing stuff that is components for other stuff, and then it finally all comes together in this big old array of 6 manufacturers by 2, top and bottom. And yeah, I've got my belts set up here, and they're all feeding in the different types of things. And yeah, and it's producing these magnetic field generators. And that was, I actually had this platform used to be bigger and used to have the space elevator on it, and I was just feeding stuff directly into that. When I had finished with that objective, I tore down the space elevator, which is a thing you can do. And so you can build it other places. Otherwise, it would, you would be bound to like the first place that you had built it. And then I just replaced it with an awesome sink. So yeah, these things are just going, these super valuable items. I just left the whole factory running because I have the power. And it's just, yeah, these super fancy items are just getting turned straight into tickets. And yeah, but you can see the Dune Desert rolling off in that direction. And then these big, the space elevator, that big line over there, that's at the far end of the world. Yeah, that's the thing that the phase objectives, you're piping into that. And then when you've fulfilled the production quota, you pull a big lever and it launches it up the space elevator into whatever orbital thing is happening there. But yeah, on the west edge of the Dune Desert here, there are like all these plateaus, and then on the far side of that is the Spire Coast, which we took a train through. So that really beautiful new area that's coming with Update 6. So yeah, I'm gonna get back on my train here, and I'm gonna go. I feel like we've covered a lot of. I'll take the. Yeah, all right. I think I know how I'm gonna go here. All right, my train I think is back in the Titan Forest, so yeah, we're gonna have to wait a bit for it to come. But yeah, like as massive as these factories are, like the world's just like, they're still just kind of like, they're not a postage stamp in the world, but yeah. Actually, while we're waiting, let me do this. Let me switch over to my browser. There's this site called satisfactorycalculator.com, and it lets you upload your save game. It's like the amount of work that must have gone into this is mind-boggling. This is just a fan-created thing. I think it's a fan-created thing. I'm pretty sure this isn't Coffee Stain. But yeah, you can import your save game into your browser here. And then what it will do is, I'm going to need to turn some markers off here. Yeah. All right, yeah, let's go full screen. Hell with it. So yeah, this is the, oh gosh, I need to alt tab away so I don't miss my train here. But okay, all right, I'm on the train. So yeah, this is the entire world, and these lines here are power lines and train lines and conveyors and transport tubes. So yeah, you can kind of see here. So like, yeah, we are currently up here, and my browser's running slow here. Yeah, so this is the factory we're in right now. And then this is the Caterium facility, that's the oil facility. And so yeah, you can kind of see like what the footprint of like these giant factories is. Like there's still tons and tons and tons of space to expand to, you know. So like players have definitely built mega factories that you know, that like that blot out most of this desert, but it's yeah, so part of the open world thing is that it's giving you tons and tons and tons of space. So yeah, this train on its way in this direction, it's loading in some Caterium because there's a pure deposit right there, so I'm able to generate tons and tons and tons of quick wire, which is needed by my computer operation over there. I'm using some alternate recipes. Alternate recipes are just things that there are little like crashed pods that you find in the world that have hard drives in them that you can recover that give you alternate recipes. So just different ways to make the same thing that change the mechanics of how you can produce something. So normally computers require plastic and copper, whereas I found some alternate recipes that let you use plastic and Caterium. And so if you have a lot of Caterium handy, then you can actually like build, it basically allows you to build stuff near places that you couldn't necessarily do it before. So yeah. Yeah, let me just go back through the Spire Coast here, honestly, because it's so damn pretty. And then we'll end up back at the grasslands. And I can show you the last area, but all right, now where is this train? This train is a ways away, but it's a relatively short route. So yeah, we're now here. I'm waiting at this station right here, and it is going along this thing unofficially called the Grand Canyon. We'll end up back at that facility. But yeah, this world is ridiculously massive. It's truly ridiculous. And yeah, I think it does kind of end up meaning something. All right, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so I guess one of the reasons that this game like really just got its hooks into me was just because like there's an interaction between the sort of like numeric systems based. First of all, everything is spatialized. You know, the act of laying out a factory, you need to think about the spatial footprint of everything and the lines in space that you're directing things through. You know, and how to keep that reasonably organized, you know, without just becoming a total mess, so that you can actually work with it and stuff. One of the things that I do for my day job is Unreal Blueprint scripting, which is, you know, a visual programming type thing where you're moving these graphs around, and the similarities were immediately apparent to me, you know, because it's like, oh yeah, like you're creating logic. There's a flow from A to B to C, and depending on how you organize things, you can make, you know, your whole operation either very ugly to look at and something that you don't have a good time working with and that has a lot of bugs because it's so messy, or you can try to make something like kind of clean, you know, and something that you can understand and refactor if you need to and stuff like that. So it definitely like, it grabs that kind of like programmy sort of part of my brain, but also the spatial part of the brain, like the sort of level design thing. It's like, okay, well, this world is just like a traditional video game open world, full of like complicated art meshes and uneven terrain, like it's all organic terrain. There are definitely flat spaces like this, but there's almost always like some hill or some big like cliff feature or like a bunch of trees or something. So it's kind of constantly throwing these contingencies at you, that you have to just take into account, and you have to just decide like, okay, well, I'm going to start building this oil operation right here because the oil is right here, and I'm going to build this platform out in this direction because I've got some room to work with and stuff. So so all right, now we're going to drive through the Spire Coast again, but from the different direction, so should be nice and pretty. So yeah, that part of it really grabbed me. Just before I had set up like railroads that go everywhere in the world, I was really just kind of like doing this almost Breath of the Wild style, just exploring this open world that just completely dwarfs you. Each new area is like exciting and beautiful to find and explore. There's all kinds of like stuff to find and a bunch of monsters around that you gotta watch out for and all that. So I really enjoyed it as just an open world exploration game that just happens to be feeding back into this factory thing of like, discovering new places where resources are, discovering slugs that let you overclock your machines, where needed to like, make production measure up, and the hard drives which give you the alternate recipes. So the whole design is knit together pretty nicely as a as a loop. I remember, and I remember, so, I played this and like, got really into it and stuff. And I wrote a few things about it on cohost.org, a great little website that I highly recommend. It's a social network that isn't designed to drink your blood. No, come back. All right, I made it. And it's got sort of like Tumblr or LiveJournal style longer form posting. So like I sort of put down these essay length thoughts about the experiences I was having playing Satisfactory and all that. It also made me aware of like other factory building games like Factorio. Factorio is a 2D game, obviously, so it doesn't have like just the sort of just everything you get with a 3D game. The sense of like a real place, a world, sprawling lushness, and all that. Factorio really is like just more. It feels a lot more like mechanistic, and I think it kind of like that affects its attitude as well. I mean, also it's just by different developers, so it feels a lot more cold and cynical and ugly. It's kind of grimdark. Whereas I think the developers, Coffee Stain, with Satisfactory, I think they wanted it to be a beautiful world, and you are kind of like eating it and fucking it up by playing the game. But I think they still like have this kind of love for this world that that forms an important part of it. The other really significant there's a design decision that I think is hugely significant here, which is that there is no like real entropy in this game. There are the consequences of your own decisions about factory. Like if you set up a factory in a way that has like a subtle inefficiency that piles up over time, then that's obviously a problem that you have to fix of your own doing. And obviously there's like traditional video game threats, like just the monsters that make the world feel a little dangerous and provide some friction and stuff to your exploring it. But in Factorio, like monsters will attack the alien creatures of that planet will attack your machines. So it's got this whole like base defense kind of thing to go with it. All right, so this is I forget if this is officially called the Gold Coast, but it's what I called it. It's like these low-lying islands that are rich in oil deposits, and so I built a whole bunch of plastic stuff here. And I built. This was another mega factory site that I built. And yeah, it is building thermal propulsion rockets. And it is feeding them straight into this sink. But yeah, this is another like just gigantic operation. I'm bringing in coal and quartz from this sort of spot in the middle of the plateau. I'm bringing in iron and copper and sandstone from the south. So just huge amounts there. But yeah, this is just like a nice like coastal islandy kind of place. I'll finish my thought about, yeah, so yeah, we're on the west coast here. It's full of islands. And yeah, it's going to be a while before I hopped out to show off this thing, but it's going to be a while before that train's going to come back, but maybe that's okay. Yeah, so with Factorio, there's this entropy in the form of aliens attacking your factories, and you got to defend them. So if left unattended, so there's a failure state, kind of, you know, like it's possible for everything to just get completely destroyed. Whereas here, once you set something up, aliens don't attack your the creatures don't attack your structures. Actually, let me go ahead and let's go for a ride. Yeah, like I think the developers of Satisfactory made a very deliberate choice to not have any kind of entropy. Like and also your machines don't break down. You know, there's no like upkeep other than just like the actual resources that they need to produce what they produce. So, and I think that's like, you know, oh god, did I? Very easy to get lost in these jungles, so I'm just going to try to. Yeah, because I think even the game's title, Satisfactory, I think they wanted to keep something about this experience kind of pleasant in a way that Factorio is like just actively ambivalent or hostile about. It's like, oh yeah, like you're horrible, you're destroying this planet, you know, whatever, everything's grimdark. Whereas here it's like, well, the world is beautiful, and, you know, this factory, you know, you are doing something gross, but there's, like, once you've got things set up, you can let it run. And one of the images in this game's, like, marketing materials and stuff is of your player character just, like, sitting with a cup of coffee. And just like sipping it while a factory line hums along. And I think that's like, that was like pretty clearly like a core experiential type goal, is that like, okay, this isn't a grim world that's just falling apart and attacking you constantly. This is like a beautiful world where you build stuff, and once you've set it going, it will run and continue to produce benefits for you. And, you know, I think that's just like a different, you know, I think that's just like a subjective creative difference. I remember talking about this on Twitter, and some of the discourse was like, well, at that point, like, it's just a puzzle game, you know, and I would rather just play a Zachtronics game. And it's like, well, this was somebody else saying this, and I was like, you know, I thought to myself, like, well, no, I mean, for me, the whole point is that it's in this beautiful 3D world. You know, the fact that this, you know, that this kind of, in a certain sense, static challenge is within this large, you know, is within this lush thing where the different parts of the world and all the different possibilities it affords you are all meaningful, you know, and realized in, you know, at a pretty high level of fidelity and stuff. There's just something about like all of those elements of it, you know, the factory stuff, the exploration, the game loops, and then just, you know, the world itself all just kind of clicked, you know. I think that's why, you know, like getting to the point where I had explored all the major regions of the game was like a huge push for me for like the first half. And then in the second half, it's been more like just, you know, figuring out where I need to go and what I need to build in order to, like, you know, kind of reach the final goals that the game is asking me to reach. And so, yeah, I'm on my way to sort of the last major big facility that I built in an area called the Blue Crater. We're passing through like I think this is called like the Southern Forest, and it's got these purple trees. I actually haven't, there's not many resources here, so I actually haven't explored this area super in depth. And also it's full of spiders, so I don't really want to mess with it that much, but you know, if there was something more valuable. But yeah, this is the Blue Crater. It is a giant crater filled with water. So it's got lots of like blank space out over the middle that you can build in. And then everything else is like these tiers. This area, so when I first got the ability to scan for oil, the two oil deposits that were remotely close that it pointed me to were the one in Forest Lake that I eventually ended up, you know, making into my main base. And then there was the one out here. And I actually went out here, and it was quite hard because I didn't have, I had the zip line, but I didn't have the jetpack, and I didn't have the hover pack, and I don't think I had the rifle yet. So it was just this massive, like, inhospitable type area. And as you can see, like, it's hard to get around because everything is all, you know, everything's got these like fungusy mushroom shapes. And so like getting up from the current level that you're in when you don't have a hover pack is like quite difficult. So anyway, yeah, like I've got this big old plastic operation here. I've got these manufacturers producing computers and circuit boards and so forth. And the oil is actually coming out of, like, there's one spot here, and then there's like these caves here that I'm, that you can see I'm pulling the oil out of here. So yeah, this was like really like quite a, this was a tough one, and this was like the you know, a fairly recent expansion. This was like the last area of the game that I hadn't really built anything major in. Hey, yeah, thanks for dropping by, Mr. Petovan. So I built this big old facility, and it's producing kind of like the computers and plastics based half of the thing that I'm doing back in Grasslands. And yeah, and I think at that point I've kind of been most of the places in the world. Yeah, like there's a lot of other like little sub areas and stuff. There's like this whole lake here and some sort of sandy flatlands that are surrounded on all sides by cliffs. But yeah, this is already, yeah, I've already been going for quite a while here. So but yeah, I just kind of wanted to like show off. Yeah, so I've done the phase 4 thing. Eventually this game is going to hit 1.0. At which point there will be probably a phase 5. I'm kind of guessing that the phase 4 goals will reduce in number. I think the developers probably just made the phase 4 goals really high just to give the game a late game, you know, until the rest of the game is finished. But yeah, and I also didn't touch on some of the stuff that clearly ties into the story. Like, yeah, there's these things here, these artifacts. So these are supposedly work in progress. As you can see, this is the cool S, and it's this weird alien artifact type thing.
Relaying message. Hello, this is paternal figure. I have taken ill and need your help to find a cure. Doctors say that the only remedy is alien artifacts.
Yeah, so it's like these weird, it's these alien artifacts. They're clearly like mysterious and powerful and kind of sinister. These are, I think these are part of the story. Once it comes in, I think like when you look at this in your inventory, work in progress. Analyzing this will not give you anything. A strange alien thing with a mind-bending and somehow familiar shape. Yeah, so that's going to tie into the story stuff, and it was sort of like hijacking your suit. Your normally helpful suit voice and telling you to collect the artifacts. So something either about the artifacts or about this planet wants you to collect those artifacts. And there's a couple of other weird things as well. There's also a type of mineral deposit called SAM, strange alien mineral, or that deposits exist in the world. You find them, you can collect from them, but there's no recipes that use it. So I'm guessing that the end game that will come in 1.0 is going to involve the SAM ore, the alien artifacts, probably some other stuff. There's also multiple places in the world where there's like what seems like an entrance to a cave, but it's been blocked off that you can't really do anything about. So I'm guessing that even though the developers have now basically detailed out all of the major regions in the world, and they're all pretty beautifully arted, and like it's definitely like at an alpha level, if not way further. I am guessing that there are still some layers to this world that we have yet to see that are going to be added before 1.0. So really looking forward to that. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed this game. I'm kind of at a stopping point with it. I could try to find 100% of the alternate recipes or something, but otherwise I think I'm mostly just gonna like wait until 1.0 comes out and then go back to it and kind of like finish the story, start a new save, whatever. Yeah, but it's cool. Yeah, and it does kind of like, yeah, some of the writing stuff I did on cohost about it like definitely grapples a little more with like the sort of ecological metaphors and stuff. It really got me thinking about if I was going to make a game like this, say at a much lower level of fidelity, like using like that Cube Realm engine that I was working on earlier this year. I would want it to be about more explicitly subverting what you're doing. So maybe you're like you're an exploited employee who's sent down to an alien planet to mine stuff and exploit the planet in turn, but then you kind of realize that like and there is an enjoyable sort of game type thing there, but you kind of realize that that's actually bullshit, and that you could do it, but you're just going to have to keep doing it forever, and that there's not really like an end point to it because the Jeff Bezos of the world don't care that you have a horrible job and that you're doing the same thing forever and ever until you die. I think where I would want to take it would be like, there's something maybe like the prior civilization on this planet, or maybe the people who are on this planet before you, decide to like, you figure out how to turn this machinery against itself. And so you produce all this stuff that's like mega scale, and that gains you access to like the highest tier of tools. And then you gain some sort of ability to like tear all of that down. Because, another game that I played, a year ago or so that had a big impact on me was Terra Nil, which is all about it's a de-terraforming game. Or it's a terraforming game where you start with a completely ruined planet. And then you gradually rejuvenate it. And so I think the idea of like using some of the design vocabulary of something like Satisfactory to build something massive on a planet, but then actually erase your own presence and leave no trace, would actually be like a really interesting, sort of thematic arc. So I don't know if I'll ever get to make. I have a billion game ideas that I'm never going to get to make, but. That definitely like sort of felt like an emotionally and politically appropriate sort of take on it for me, so I would love to do something like that. But but there's also just like making the actual factory gameplay enjoyable is like so much work. So I don't want to underestimate that, like, building a complicated, interesting enough game that it's then fun to like subvert it and tear it down. I think, I don't want to underestimate, what that would take. So, yeah, man, I think that's just about everything that I've, I'll tab back to my big old ridiculous map of the world. And if you look for this game on YouTube, there's a bunch of people who do absolutely ridiculous stuff with it. A lot of the YouTubers that I found, and this actually sort of was like a mislead, when I was like trying to learn how to get better at the game, are a lot of the biggest YouTubers for this game are sort of more focused on aesthetics. I think a lot of folks would probably look at my factories and be like, oh, well, these are unfinished. Like, you're supposed to put walls around these. You're supposed to put a ceiling around them and stuff. And yes, like I don't really bother with that stuff because I don't necessarily care about it, per se. Like maybe when I start a new game after 1.0 or something, I'll actually care about that stuff, but I'm more just worried about like the getting the function down, and while I'm still kind of learning everything here. But yeah, like people have made some like really beautiful buildings, I mean, they're industrial brutalist type things, but they're still like very impressive and cool. They have a genuine architectural sensibility about them. Oh, cool. Yeah. Hi. I did notice some old Wad Wednesday crew folks have come in. Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm just about finished here, honestly. Like, I don't know if I really have anything more to say. Yeah. But thanks for tuning in. Yeah. Like, yeah. This game is really something. Like, I don't know. I can imagine a lot of reasons that someone would bounce off of it or just find it unpalatable or something. But like, it's really something, and if you like just exploring a big wild world, I hope I haven't spoiled it too much for you. If you start a new game, none of this stuff is going to be here, so like you'll just get to like explore it unspoiled. But yeah, it's been fun, and yeah, man, yeah, it sure is a game where you build a bunch of stuff, and yeah, I just felt like I wanted to document this and show it off. I mean, I've got my stuff backed up, so I hope I don't lose it someday, but if I do, maybe this video will still be up. I don't know, man. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has been Satisfactory. Pretty good game. It made me think some interesting thoughts. So, yeah. Alright, well, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. It's been a long time since I've streamed, but it's great to see everyone who dropped by in chat. I miss you folks. Maybe I'll bring back Wad Wednesday someday. Not today, but yeah. Thanks so much, folks. Have a lovely night.